I want to thank you all for being here. What we're doing tonight, as Rick mentioned, is a scoping session for the environmental impact report that's being prepared for the Apple campus. What we want to do tonight is hear from you. We're going to talk a little briefly about the agenda. We have a short presentation, and the rest of the evening is all about you. What topics you'd like us to look at in the EIR. We're delighted we have a lot of people here interested in the project, and we are looking forward to hearing from all of you about what you'd like us to study. Just quickly, Rick Kitson is our Public Information Director, and he will be our facilitator for the meeting. He will make sure we're all on time, so we get you home in time, and that we get all your comments as well. He's going to go over the agenda, a few rules, some for us and some for the participants, and then we'll have a short round of presentations and then move right into the discussions. So I'm going to hand the microphone over to Rick Kitson.
Thanks, Archie. We have a meeting here with our community. We've been holding meetings of this type in Cupertino for about 16 years, and so we really appreciate your coming. We have a unique format that we'll explore in more detail as we move into the agenda, but we will have presentations after me. Terry from Apple will do a brief review of what has been on our website for some time. Following Apple, we will have Judy and Adam from LSA Consulting. They will be doing the heavy lifting with the environmental impact report, which is the product that ultimately comes out of this process. And from there, then, we will go into a tabletop discussion where we will begin our initial public inventory of those key concerns, those topics of primary interest that are shared by members of the community that are here today. Now, this is just the first of any number of opportunities that anyone who has something that they believe should be looked at as part of the environmental review process. This is just the first way for people to contribute. There are cards on the tables if you just want to fill out the cards. You can certainly, we hope you will engage in the discussion, and you can go online to cupertino.org/applecampus2, number 2. So any number of opportunities to provide your input. From there, this would probably be a good time to remind people to turn off their cell phones or put them on silent. From there, then, we'll report out and describe the next steps in the process. We do have some ground rules. There are 3 ground rules for the public officials here this evening, and that is we will listen. That's what we're here for. We're not making any decisions. We are not reaching any findings. We are listening to the community, to you, and what the topics of interest that will be included in the environmental impact report, otherwise known as the EIR. You'll become, unfortunately, much better acquainted with the alphabet soup that is this process. But it actually does make sense. So we will be listening. So there will be a lot of questions that people may have, and ultimately, we hope they will be addressed, and any appropriate topic for the environmental review will be addressed absolutely in that report. We've been doing this for a while in Cupertino. We find it works better when you speak in a way that others may listen. So don't talk at people. They tend not to listen when you talk at them. It may sound cliche, but it happens, especially if you're speaking with somebody that you disagree with. and listen in a way so that others may speak. If you're cleaning your nails, distracted, somebody listened to you, now they're talking, they disagree, and you're looking away, that's pretty rude, pretty insulting, tends to really shut down any opportunity we have to have a community dialogue and reach a meaningful, intelligent decision through this process. It actually works, and we hope you find, as we have, that it's a wonderful process and you'll get a lot out of it. With that, we're going to hand it off to Terry, and if you could tell us a little bit about your project.
Good evening. I'm Terry. I'm Terry Reagan from Apple, and I am the project manager for Apple Campus 2. And so tonight, I thought what we talk about tonight, you really want to hear the why, the what, and the when. So when Steve Jobs made his presentation to the City Council on June 7th, he unveiled the design for, this is the center main building, which anchors the campus. And in that same presentation, I think Steve did a really good job of explaining why. The fact is, we're growing like a weed, he said. So we need space. So it's a pretty simple mathematical calculation. We need the space. But he also talked about why in Cupertino. And he said that this is where we're founded. This is where we want to be. This is our further reinforcement to the city and community of Cupertino just by building this second campus. So let me go into what. And I think it's important to understand what is currently there. So this is an aerial view of the site. And the site consists of 22 buildings, or over 20 buildings, that total about 2.7 million square feet. And you'll have to bear with me. Let's see if how well this works. I just practiced for the first time today. So on the west of the site, it's bound by Wolf Road. To the north, Homestead. To the east, North Tantau. And to the south, I-280. It's interesting to note that this piece of land bound here, this is a secure campus of HP now, and we procured that 98-acre site and we closed that in December of last year. Oops. So what are we going to build? Let me go into the various component parts for you. The main building. It's a 2.8 million square foot building, 4 stories, 2 levels of underground parking that'll accommodate 4,600 cars. To the south, we have a parking structure. This will accommodate 4,300 cars. We also will be incorporating a corporate transit center. And I think it's important to point out that nearly 30% of the Apple employees get to work by an alternate means to the single occupied vehicle. So it's in part because of we really strongly encourage people getting out of their automobiles. We've got a bus system that we operate that goes as far south as Gilroy and Santa Cruz and far north is San Francisco. So we're looking for opportunities to continue to get people out of their car. Adjacent to the parking structure will be our central plant. And I'd like to point out that the roof of the central plant, the roof of the main building, and the roof canopy of the parking structure will house an array of solar or photovoltaic cells. And right now we're calculating about 700,000 square feet of photovoltaic cells. So our objective or our goal that we set for ourselves is a net zero energy approach, which means that we want to generate an equal amount or more power than we consume off the grid. So rounding out the campus, we have a 1,000-seat auditorium. This is where new Apple products will be announced. We'll also have a corporate fitness and wellness center that'll accommodate the needs of the 12,000 employees that we're envisioning will occupy the new building. To the east, we'll have parking for the corporate auditorium, and we'll also have about 300,000 square feet of research facilities. And it's important to point out that we look at this as really a replacement, effectively a replacement. And that'll become clear as I go into the statistics. But equal to the emphasis that we're placing on the architectural design, we're also placing a significant emphasis on the sustainable approach and the sustainable design. So currently, the site has about 25% landscape. And you can see this, the parking areas here and here. This is kind of fun. When we complete the project, our objective is to triple that, 75%. Today, there are about 4,300 trees. We're looking to increase that to about 6,000. We're also looking at incorporating and bringing back the apricot orchards that were there. So that will somehow be weaved into the landscape message. So summarizing, we're increasing the total square footage that exists on site by 15%, 2.7 to 3.1 million. We're more than tripling the landscape. The trees we're targeting to increase by at least 40%. This, I think, is a very telling statistic. Reduction of the parking, surface parking by 90%. And that comes at a price tag, obviously, and we're putting the parking underground, under the building, and in structured parking. And finally, I think this also is a telling statistic that even though the total square footage is greater by 15%, we're actually reducing the building footprint by 40%. And I did a quick calc before the meeting, and that 400,000 square feet is about 9 acres of land that we're returning to landscape and green areas. So summarizing, existing 2.7 million square feet, proposed is 3.1 million square feet. For purposes of analysis, we're incorporating another 300,000 square feet for future expansion, for the total of 3.4 million that will be analyzed by LSA and the city. So that covers what? Now let's talk about when. We're looking to break ground next year, later part of next year, in the hopes of completing the project in 4 years' time from now. And I'm not sure what this young lady is doing in the foreground, but I can assure you that those of us that are working on the project will be dancing with her in 4 years when we open the project. So that concludes my remarks. I'd like now to turn it over to Judy and to Adam of LSA, and they'll go more into process. Thank you.
Good evening. So as Rick said, we're from LSA Associates. We're the environmental consultants that the City of Cupertino has hired to evaluate the Apple Campus 2 project. As Rick said also, CEQA not only makes a lot of sense, but it's also state law. So the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, let's see, here we go. I have the clicker. Yep. To the right. No? The other right. Yes, perfect. I'm slightly dyslexic. All right. So CEQA is the foundation of an environmental and law policy in the state of California. It encourages the protection of all aspects of the environment by requiring cities and other agencies to prepare multidisciplinary documents and to make decisions on the findings of those studies regarding the environmental effects of a proposed project or action. And the basic goal of CEQA is to develop and maintain a high-quality environment now and in the future. CEQA also has some specific goals, and the City of Cupertino is the lead agency, and the specific goal of CEQA for lead agencies is to identify and disclose to the public and other agencies the significant environmental effects of their actions. For example, an action would be a project or a plan, and either avoid the significant environmental effects where it is feasible or mitigate those significant environmental effects where feasible. And to mitigate means to impose measures to ensure that you can reduce those effects, preferably to a level of less than significant, wherever you possibly can. The City of Cupertino, also as lead agency, has determined that it would be an environmental impact report that will be prepared and to identify and analyze the effects on the environment. And tonight we're here at one of the first steps in this process, which is the scoping session. And the purpose of the scoping session is to allow you an opportunity and a voice early in the process to identify your concerns and the environmental topics as well as the alternatives that you think need to be evaluated in the EIR. We're at the very beginning of our process. We're at the very beginning of understanding, identifying, describing the project, and so we're very much looking to gather as much information as we possibly can. And CEQA provides that for scoping sessions, such as this one, to allow the public and other agencies, for example, the Regional Water Quality Control Board or the Bay Area Air Quality Control District, to send in their concerns and their comments on a particular project to ensure that we address them in the environmental impact report. So the purpose of tonight is certainly not to discuss whether you like or dislike the project, but to give us information that will help address specific environmental topics and concerns in the EIR that we're going to be preparing, and that will also allow the public as well as the decision makers in the City of Cupertino to understand the environmental impacts on the project in terms of their deliberations on it as well. And now Adam is going to talk about the specific environmental review process that we're going to be following for you. Adam?
Thanks. Hi, good evening, everybody. Adam Weinstein. I'm the project manager of the EIR. The slide before you is actually a favorite item of city planners and consultants. It's a flow chart, and this one in particular takes us through the environmental review process step by step. And so I'll just briefly go through this flow chart step by step. The first step, obviously, is that the project is initiated. In this case, Apple, the project applicant, has proposed to build a new campus. And after determining that an EIR is needed, the city issued what's called a notice of preparation, which essentially states that the city is preparing an EIR for the project, and it wants to hear from the public and agencies their thoughts on what topics should be addressed in the EIR. Next is the scoping of environmental issues, part of the process, which is where we are tonight. It's the green square outlined by yellow. As we've mentioned, the scoping session is intended to help determine the environmental issues that are addressed in the EIR. And as Judy and others have mentioned, it's a really early phase in the environmental review process. And so after tonight's meeting, we'll leave with your comments and thoughts. We'll conduct the research on the site, and we'll do the analysis and prepare the draft EIR. And that preparation of the draft EIR process will extend into the spring of next year. After that, the draft EIR will be published. It'll be circulated for public comments during the 45-day public review period. And during those 45 days, you'll have an opportunity to review the EIR and submit comments to the city. At that point, the city will also hold a public hearing on the draft EIR. And at that time, you can show up and provide verbal or written comments on the draft EIR, or you can just listen to the comments of others. LSA and the city will then prepare written responses to all of the comments received on the draft EIR, and we'll prepare what's called a response to comments document. That response to comments document will also include any revisions that are made to the draft EIR. And together, that response to comments document and the draft EIR will constitute what's called the final EIR, which is the document that the decision makers ultimately at the end of the process will make a decision on to certify. So the Planning Commission and the City Council will both review and decide whether to certify the final EIR. That will probably happen in the fall of 2012. So that's kind of the CEQA process in a nutshell. I should mention too that the CEQA process is separate from project review and approval, including the amendments to the general plan and the other entitlements that are requested as part of the project. So discrete parts of this process, the project review and also the environmental review. To go into the environmental topics to be addressed in the EIR, based on our knowledge of the project site and also the planning context of the site, we're anticipating addressing a number of environmental topics in the EIR, and these are also listed in the agenda as well. So the list in front of you represents a preliminary determination of the environmental issues that we think will require some sort of analysis in the EIR, and that doesn't preclude addressing more topics in the EIR beyond the ones that are listed here, and in fact making sure that all applicable topical areas are addressed in the EIR is really the purpose of the meeting tonight. So briefly, I'll go through this list topic by topic. The land use and planning policy analysis will look at how the project could change land use patterns and whether it would be consistent with applicable planning policies in the area, like the general plan and the North Valco master plan. For aesthetics, we'll evaluate how the project could change the visual environment of Cupertino and then also views in the area. Population, employment, and housing, we'll evaluate how the project could change the demographics of Cupertino and the region, and we'll focus on issues such as workforce housing and the area's jobs housing balance. Biological resources, we'll study the effects of the project on Calabasas Creek and plant and animal communities that could occur on the site. Cultural resources, this topic will focus on archaeological resources that could occur on the site, and we'll also take a look at built historical resources like Glendenning Barn. Geology, seismicity, and soils, we'll look at all the aspects of the geologic environment, including soils and faults, and how the project might be affected by those conditions. Hazards and hazardous materials, in this topical area, we'll cover things like contaminated soil and groundwater, and we'll also look at whether the buildings on the site contain lead, asbestos, or other hazardous materials that would require special consideration in the EIR. Transportation and circulation, this will be obviously a really big topic for this EIR. We'll look really comprehensively at the project's effects on the entire transportation system, ranging from bikes and pedestrians to transit and private motor vehicles. And we'll conduct a really focused analysis of the effects of the proposed closure of a part of Prune Ridge Avenue, and we'll also look at how many trips are generated by the project and how those trips are distributed on roadways in Cupertino and elsewhere. Related to transportation and circulation is noise. We'll look at how the project will affect the noise environment, and we'll also look at how project employees might be affected by existing noise levels as well. Greenhouse gas emissions and sustainability, that's obviously another big topic. We'll look at how the sustainability features that are proposed as part of the project work in the context of the project's emissions of greenhouse gases. Air quality, we'll look at pollutants generated by both the construction and operation of the project, including the pollutants generated by employee vehicle trips. Public services and utilities, how will the project affect demand for services like parks and fire and school and police services? And then we'll also look at what effect the project will have on utilities. And lastly, this isn't an environmental topic that's listed on the slide, but as part of the EIR, we're also interested in evaluating and identifying project alternatives that are designed to reduce the environmental impacts of the project. So we're also very interested to hear from you tonight about your ideas on project alternatives that could be analyzed in the EIR. Thanks.
Thank you, Adam, Terry, Judy. There's a brief overview. We're done talking now. We're not going to be talking at you. This is the part where your work begins. Essentially, the EIR process, the environmental review, is a topic-driven program. So what we need, what is most useful to allow us to develop the most robust and in-depth environmental assessment possible, is topics. So think of it, this next part of the meeting, as reverse Jeopardy. What we really need are the different topics. We need all those questions turned into topics so then we can start organizing all the analysis and all the data underneath those topics. So that will be the next part of our meeting. I'd like to ask people who are sitting in the back to please move forward. We have some spots here at the tables. We have scribes at each table. These are people who are spending their evening with us tonight to collect comments. They will record every comment. None are more important than others. We want to capture as much as we possibly can from this gathering. So we'll have scribes at each table, and the first order of business is to have people introduce themselves. We're all adults, it's only polite. Introduce yourselves, and the first deliverable from each group is to have a spokesperson. It's an interesting, sometimes more difficult than it ought to be, but we need someone to speak for your group. And then your group begins populating your aggregate list of topics and issues that you're aware of. When it's all said and done, in about a half hour or thereabouts, we will then have you pick your own top three. Your own top three shared concerns for your group. Sometimes we find there's a lot of commonality. Often we find that there are significant differences that come from the different discussions. We will capture those as well, but every comment that is shared, every topic that is presented at the table will be included and provided to the consultants. We will report out the shared concerns. Archie and I will talk a little bit about the next steps, and then we'll be done by 8:30. Great. We're back from the breakout. Thank you so much, everybody. I think you may have found, as we have, that every time this happens, it's different. But it's always interesting, and we look forward to incorporating as much as possible directly into the initial EIR. So to start things out, if Tracy, you would please go to table 2. If you're reporting out, please introduce yourself and talk briefly about your top 3 concerns from your table.
Okay. I need to look at this. Hi, my name is Donna Austin, and I'm the spokesman for table 2. And our first choice was the cultural resources and what was going to happen to the Glendenning barn. And we had back and forth big discussions about where it should be, and I guess we agreed it should be somewhere in town. A couple of us from the Monte Vista area said we really liked the idea of having it in at Stockelmeyer or McClellan Ranch, or even Sims property. The other people that lived on the east side of town felt maybe it should be closer to where historically it exists now. So those are 2 opinions. Then we had a big discussion on traffic flow and circulation, where the entrance and exits for visitors and for the regular employees, and traffic backups. What happens at Prune Ridge and Santa Clara where it dead ends? Is there ways for them to get in and out and around if they want to go over to Valco Village or into Cupertino somewhere? And how do the Santa Clara residents feel about the closure of Prune Ridge? Not that maybe some people care. The third concern we had was with the trees and the plan, especially the ash trees along Homestead. We were concerned about whether those would not be impacted because they were part of a bigger plan, and they're beautiful as you go along Homestead. And I think those are our three major ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen?
Hi, my name's Pat Robbins. I'm a resident of Santa Clara. In fact, I live right on Prune Ridge, so highly impacted by this project. Of course, our three topics, well, first topic, traffic, then we said traffic and traffic. I think that's going to be a common theme throughout here. And we know that the EIR report's going to be addressing this heavily. We want to make sure that people understand that mitigation of traffic concerns are high on our list. Coordination with the City of Santa Clara. They're already making changes to Prune Ridge as we speak now. They're taking it down from 4 lanes down to 2. So we have concerns about that. Our second one, it was brought up that Apple's doing a lot of work with a lot of landscaping, increasing the amount of trees, shrubberies, and green areas. And it seems a shame that they're going to fence that in and allow no public access. The third area is the construction, noise, traffic associated with all the construction. Hopefully there's no contaminated soil that will affect the surrounding neighborhoods, debris disposal. We can go on, but I know there are other people here.
Thank you, Pat. Tracy, who is your spokesperson?
Spokesperson Neil Struthers. I was nominated by the fact that I was the only one with a tie. So, note to self, make sure I don't dress up next time. We spent a lot of time talking about this project. I will make full disclosure that a lot of discussion was the net benefit to the city, but we're being tasked with the 3 concerns. So, the 3 concerns, the first one being that this borders 3 other cities, and that there should be some collaboration with those cities, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, and San Jose. Is that right? San Jose, yes. Well, this is Cupertino. Right, well, this is Cupertino. So Cupertino's obviously going to look at their general plan and how, jobs, housing balance, but there's a suggestion that there should be some collaboration or at least some investigation with other cities. Second, the closure of Prune Ridge and how that affects traffic and the access to Kaiser Hospital. And lastly, the issue of retaining the mature trees along the periphery of the project to create a view shield of the project, even though it is to a lot of people very aesthetically pleasing. For those that live next to it, they want to continue to see those mature trees. So those are our 3 items. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Neil. Next, table 4. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Mark Matsumoto. I am the representative for Table 4. Hopefully I'm holding this close enough to my mouth here. So probably what I'm going to repeat a theme that's going to be repeated a lot during tonight. So our first concern is traffic, in particular, and 3 streets, but there's also a couple of other streets, but in particular Prune Ridge, Tantau, and Homestead. In regards to Prune Ridge, we're concerned about, of course, the closure, and we're wondering if there are measures that can be taken to either preserve it, hopefully, either through a bridge or through a tunnel. Also, with access to it from Wolf. In regards to Tantau, we're wondering how, with the closure of Prune Ridge, how the increased traffic will affect the medical facility over there. In regards to Homestead, since there are many residents along that street, we're wondering how bus travel will affect the increased bus traffic will affect the residences that live there. And a couple other streets that we're concerned about are the Lawrence 288 exit expressway. I think I said that twice now, but the exit there. And also one mitigation we're thinking is creating an independent access to the campus. So we lovingly dubbed it the Apple exit. The second concern that we have is noise generated by this new project. So one is with the generators on the site over there, how that will affect the noise, and also the increased traffic, such as buses, how those 2 elements will affect the schools and hospitals over there. And last, but certainly not least, we have hazardous materials. In particular, how demolition will affect the air quality. There was an example of I believe the IBM facility being demolished, and there was a big dust cloud, so we're concerned about how that dust cloud from HP's building will affect the quality. And also with the existing hazardous materials on site, and also a concern with whether or not new hazardous materials will be introduced to the site and how that will affect the surrounding area.
Thank you. Tracy, table 6.
Table 6 is right in line with the rest of the community, so.
Tom, could you introduce yourself?
I'm Tom Dyer. I'm the one with the most gray hair at table 6. We have a long list. We'll give you all the topics, but by the same token, we reduced down to 3. So here we go. Traffic is top of our list, both during construction and after. 280 is a tragedy now at 8 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock at night. This can't get any better. As a corollary to that, construction crews have started and reported other sites start at 3 in the morning to be able to handle their traffic concerns. That's got to be considered as part of this project. We also brought up the air emissions and the water quality and the flood protection concern. That has already been identified in the plan, but we have that as a reinforcement. We're also concerned about the public access to what has become Cupertino's Taj Mahal. We'll have world visitors coming to see it, and as I understand, it's a closed campus. And we might even try and ask if we can get an Apple Store access to help promote it. And then, of course, the housing in the schools during and after construction. What's likely to happen? We have an impact that we'd like to see addressed this time.
Great, thank you, Tom. Karen, we have table 9. If you could please stand and introduce yourself.
My name is Jim Homer, and I think we spent as much time talking about the benefits of the project, and it was a challenge to come up with our concerns. But those concerns are not unlike the rest that I've heard here tonight. The first one was traffic, and specifically the intersection of Stevens Creek and Wolf. Our second concern was the environmental impact on Calabasas Creek, and we didn't get into specifics on that. That is a concern. Our last and final was the cleaning up of hazardous waste, which was just mentioned, because we are concerned about what was there on that existing site and what will again go there in the future. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jim. Next table.
Hi, I'm Jim Black. We went through an evaluation from the topics that were given to us. We have about 18 different categories that we looked at, but like everybody else has said so far, traffic was number 1 for us, particularly the freeway off-ramp and on-ramps at Wolf, which we think are already a problem and will be even more so as the project proceeds. And then secondly, we tied in population and land use together more or less, and looking at the impact, which is also a question, if Apple puts 12,000 employees into this site, are they coming from someplace else? Is that vacating buildings in the area? And does it leave those buildings vacant? And then that leaves a housing issue for the city wrapped into one. And as part of the land use that Donna mentioned, we'd sure like to see the Glendenning barn relocated appropriately. So on the housing, we're anticipating that there would be visitors, and where would they stay? Would there be hotels or what for that? And really a clear picture of the population, of the employment picture going forward. Because if they're going to only gain 300,000 square feet, what happens to the other buildings that Apple occupies now? Will those be filled over time and have a backfill of population for the city? So if you look at the total population increase, it could be somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 people over some time. And how does that impact the city? I think that's covered. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Karen, table 8.
My name is Homer Tong. I'm on the high school board. And guess what? well, our number one, at least one of our topics is concern about schools. But before I get on with that, I do want to mention in our group that we have half of us as Cupertino residents and the other half as being involved in the construction and business, so that you get a perspective of the makeup of our group. Okay, in terms of schools, it's already been suggested that if there is increase of students, and we obviously are having increase in students in our school district right now, and of course, I want to have a little commercial. Our schools are, you know, such that families want to come to Cupertino. But anyway, the point is that with all this here, we have to start thinking. That was suggested that our schools may have to go to 2 stories because we have limited room and so on. So these are kind of impacts. Another one impact which you have already mentioned, I think very well, and that is traffic and noise. Specifically, we were focusing on during construction. And so mitigation of different types would have to be instituted, because sometimes in construction, things start moving at 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, and that's, yeah, that can be an impact. So, oh, hello.
Oh. Let's let Homer finish.
Correction, okay. Anyway, those are concerns, but the other point that's interesting with our group is we were given 3 topics. So we have one topic which is I would consider as a praise, and that is called the construction follows the LEAD project. LEAD project, for you folks, it means leadership in environmental and energy design, which means that whatever is done, there is a lot of energy given so that whatever is done would be more green. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Homer. Next, you could introduce yourself, please.
This is Table 11. I'm Don Sherman. I'm a retired electronics engineer living in Cupertino right now. Obviously, a bunch of the things that we put down on this you've already covered, so I'll get into some of the minor things since the major things like traffic have been gone over here. One of the things we're concerned about is that we'd really like to make sure, as far as jobs and other things are concerned, I didn't mean Steve Jobs, I meant people's jobs, the idea that the materials that are going to be used in this building, we try and encourage as much of this stuff to come from the United States as possible, as opposed to all the solar panels coming from China and putting our solar panel makers out of business and stuff like that, which they've already done that, but that's another story. We just try to encourage, you know, local jobs and more stuff that will help here. Another thing we were concerned about is in Japan, they've actually done very well with when you have large facilities, they put a dormitory on there. They actually have single people residences, and they have married housing right either on the campus or very close to it. So one of the things that I would like to encourage is that the City of Cupertino would work with Apple in trying to make sure that we actually have real dormitories right there so people can just walk to work. Apple probably isn't going to do this on their property, but if the area around there could be zoned for high density, then it might be able to reduce a lot of traffic. It would give a lot of place for people that are coming in for other countries to have jobs here, as well as our university students just coming off. We have a lot of single people, young people that are working at Apple. Cheap housing. And I mention cheap because very often what happens around here, as you get closer to work, the rent rates go way up. And what I'd like to see is something where we have reasonable housing that's dense and close. And that would make it a lot easier for the people that are just starting to work there. Another thing is, you've mentioned the idea that this area used to be farms. As you remember, cherry chase and all the rest of the stuff, there were cherry trees, there were apricot trees. Why not zone some of this commercial, agricultural, whatever you want to call it, and actually have a working farm and actually make money from it even. And so we have real live either a community farm or something where we would have actual residential farmers. You know, we can even put them under a microscope and people come in and look at them. But just something where we actually utilize these trees and make some money from it and have something which, you know, contributes both to the air quality in the area and jobs in the area also for those that are involved in the farming community. So that's a little bit different than the main things we talked about here before, but what can I say? Thanks a lot.
Right. Thank you, Don. Karen, we have table 7. I think you're it.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Squarsha. I'm actually a city employee, but I am by default the speaker for this table. So I'm going to speak with neutrality on all of these topics. The first one is traffic concerns, freeway access to and from the campus during morning commutes and peak hours. Are extra lanes going to be added, and any type of solutions for congestion on surface streets? Also, secondly, will Apple develop a hiring practice with local organizations to hire people locally, specifically with the construction? Are there going to be is there going to be a hiring policy implemented for when the construction begins? And lastly, will Apple be partnering with the schools, particularly with all the budget cuts, and increase the number of students in the top-rated local schools?
Thank you, Kirsten. Little did you know then when you started with the city clerk's office that you would be reporting out. Well, great. I think that's everybody. Is there any table that didn't get a chance to report out? 14.
Yeah.
Right. If you could introduce yourself.
Of course. I'm Jessica, and my table had many of the same concerns that you all did, so we're kind of echoing what you're saying. We were interested in knowing what hazardous materials are already located on the HP site and how they would be taken care of, what kind of materials, and their disposal. We were also wondering if there would be manufacturing that required certain hazardous materials, and again, what they were. We were also interested in what was going to happen with Calabasas Creek. There's been flooding there before, if Apple was going to do anything to mitigate that, as well as we were interested in a possible riparian corridor. And of course, like everybody else, we were concerned about traffic. We were wondering how Apple was going to encourage alternate modes of transportation and accommodating pedestrians and bicyclists. Will bike lanes be put in? And again, how are they going to encourage pedestrians and bicyclists? Will Prune Ridge stay open? That was also a concern that we heard. And the big one, traffic on 280, as well as getting on and off the freeway, traffic on Wolf Road and Homestead as well. So that's what we have.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? I think we got everyone. Thank you so much, Karen, Tracy, and all of you who had these discussions. We're almost done. And we're ahead of schedule. If I could get the slideshow up on the display, please. In the meantime, we can talk about the next steps. And do you want to do that for us, RT?
Thank you again for doing such a wonderful job helping us identify topics that we're going to have to study. I think we're all learned something new here about everybody's concerns. So next steps, as you can see on the slide, we are, can I use my finger? We are right here in the process. We're going to go through all of this, and the next time you see the project, you will be looking at the draft EIR. It takes a lot of time for us to start putting all these comments together from the agencies, have all the separate consultants prepare the drafts, review them, and then put them in one document. So you can expect to see that out for our current schedule in the spring of next year. And we will have a 45-day period where we will hear from you all of the questions or comments you have on the draft. You can see how they've been incorporated into the EIR. You might have questions about certain topics, and we'd love to hear from you again. We will keep our website updated. Each of you has an agenda with a link to our website. That's where you can sign up to get updates. So every time our webpage is updated, you will know that something is happening. It could be a small correction somewhere, or it could be an announcement for a meeting. So that's how you can stay connected to this project. Just a little housekeeping issue. If you are planning to send in comments either by email or by note cards, please make sure you get it to us by September 19th, because that will help us consolidate all of them and include them in the EIR. So that's our deadline for this particular task. And again, thank you everybody for coming. We are so happy to have had you all here, and we look forward to seeing you again spring of next year. In the meantime, don't be strangers. Call, email, ask us questions whenever you need to, and we're happy to answer it in the best way we can.
And thank you, Archie. Thank you to all of our scribes. If you could please give them a round of applause. And as Archie said, input, as anytime you have an idea, please send it to us. Given the global level of interest, we are not able to respond to every single question about the campus, but we're going to really, really try. So this broadcast, it will be on our website. All the presentation slides will also be on the website. All the information that we have about the project, we're sharing as public information. So you know what we know. So we may often, if you ask a question, we may direct you to that website first, but as Archie said, it's a very, very high priority for us to get back to you in some way if we at all can. So thank you again for coming, and remember, September 19th is when input on the initial EIR is closed. Thank you.